You are watching this video because you want to learn the basics of being a good salesperson. It's interesting because I've been in the sales arena for well over 13 years and I'm very good at it. It's what I do for an actual living. I'm actually a recruiter, but recruiting is like sales and HR combined. You still have quotas. You still basically convincing someone to buy a service or product ultimately that they're not sure that they want yet. So ultimately, I'm going to share with you 5 tips. Here's the thing, I made these up, but I have also noticed that good salesmen do these 5 things. Keep this in mind too, and I think this is interesting. I was never trained on sales. I was never actually trained on how to be a recruiter. I was just thrown into it and told, here's what you're selling, here's what you basically say, and get as many people to sign up. Okay, so that's what I've been doing for a living for like well over 13 years. I mean, because I started in 2006. Yeah, so 13 years, right? So keep this in mind. I was never trained for sales. I was never trained for recruiting. I was never trained on what to say and how to react. I just figured it out. But ultimately, I think that's what happens, is that when you are thrown into a situation where you're in sales or recruiting, there's these certain rules that you just basically kind of figure it out. So I'm gonna go ahead and share these with you right now. And you know they're official when they're on a sticky note. So, number 1, describe, don't ask. What you wanna do, whatever the product or service is, just start explaining it. Tell all about it. Along the way, don't ask them if they're interested. Never ask that, because if they're there standing in front of you and they're listening to you and they're not stopping you, they're listening. So as long as they're listening, you want to tell them about the thing. What I've learned is people often have faith and respect in someone who seems to know what they're talking about. Even if you don't really know what you're talking about, as long as you're describing the product or service, they're finding confidence in what you're saying. So don't ask if they're interested. Just start at it. Just start talking about the thing, because ultimately, you're the salesman, you're the recruiter. It's your job to inform them, to give them the information that they need on that. Just start describing what it does, what it's all about. That's number 1. Number 2, don't assume their motivation. See, certain people buy a product or service based on the price or the convenience or the location, etc. And there may be certain things you may think, this is the best deal you can get on this. Well, maybe they don't care. Maybe they have a better budget and they could afford better. And maybe they actually were willing to spend more money for a different product that you don't sell. And you need to sell them on maybe the mid-grade because your quote is based on that. Well, what you want to figure out is, well, what is their motivation? When you want to basically gauge, as you're talking, what things they seem to tune into the most. Whatever comments they do say, you want to divide it up into, okay, so what's their motivation? Because once you start following their motivation instead of what you think it might be, well, then you're in success right there, because you know how to continue the narrative. Number 3, you want to present them with some sort of accountability, whether it is to fill out a form, have them type in their email address so that you can send them more information. Go ahead and accept this first step, whatever that is, however the job entails. You want them to physically sort of get committed to the thing, because once you involve them, then they're further down the road with you. They may be on the fence about the product or service, but the moment you start involving them and requiring some kind of interaction out of them, other than verbal, then that's giving you more leverage, assuming they haven't told you no yet. And that's what salesmen do. They keep going until they're told no. And when they're told no, then may I ask why? What about it that makes you think this isn't a good fit for you? And then it's still a last ditch way to figure out what their motivation is. And maybe their motivation was something you can easily fix and provide for them, and it won't be a problem. Number 4, explain whatever the next step and the next time frame is. Once you get them in there through whatever the thing is, next you need to tell okay, so once you get this done, here's what's going to happen next and when it's going to happen. That way they can map out. Now that you've got them in, you're like, okay, well, now they're still looking to think, well, if I did do this thing, which I haven't said no to yet, what would be the next step? And let me plan this out in my head. That's where you're steering the conversation. And then lastly, you want to close the deal by assuming that they are buying until they reject you. And I did say that a moment ago, but that's ultimately how you want to frame this whole thing. So ultimately, at the end, whatever the official thing that is that you have to officially do to close the thing, make sure that they don't leave until they do that official thing that they have to sign, whether it's to sign, whether it's to show up at this other place tomorrow, whatever it is, or whether you're selling a product, that they actually buy the thing. And even then, like, if they're buying and say, okay, well, so that comes to a total of, and then you wait for them to give you the money. It's a way that you're never actually really asking, are they interested? Do you want to buy the thing? All you're doing is you're laying the steps out so that you're providing a path for them to show them how to do the thing. And that way, I think too, for me personally, it keeps it from seeming like you're a high pressure salesman, because you're not really trying to talk them into anything. As far as if you're doing it right, the perception that they have of you is, this is a knowledgeable person who knows their stuff, even if you don't, even if you just kind of looked over the details right before you started talking to them. And that happens to me all the time. I'm constantly put in situations where I don't even know what I'm about to be talking about, but I just kind of wing it based on what I see in front of me, that sort of thing. They don't know that. Again, a lot of times just the fact that you're talking about something and you seem like you're knowledgeable and they have that basic need, sometimes that's all it really is. They need someone to talk them through the steps. And if you don't, it's going to be the next person that talks them into it. But I think especially with the concept of, oh, he's like a used car salesman, I think when you make it too obvious that you're trying to sell them, that's the way it comes across. But in the right manner, where you seem to be the information source, you think of it that way. You're not selling a product or service. You are an information source for them to get to this thing. So you're basically removing the hurdles. And the hurdles that you're removing, number one, describe, don't ask. First, you're providing the details they need to know about it. The next hurdle, number two, don't assume their motivation. The moment you start trying to tell them what they're motivated by, that may turn them away. So once you find out, oh, this is what they're motivated by, you remove that wall. Number three, present them with accountability. See, until you get them in, whatever it is, that first step, they can still easily go out the door. But the moment they have any accountability, even if it's something as, you'll notice that if you ever look at model homes, they have a refrigerator full of water and soda and snacks on the table. The moment you begin accepting something, it makes that person feel somewhat committed to some degree, even psychologically, that they need to stay there with it. So that's number three. You're basically, the wall you're doing is right there is basically removing the exit from being as close to them as it was before. Number four, explain the next step and the time frame. That way you're explaining the barrier, you're removing the barrier of, well, how would I even do this? You're clearly telling them how they would do and what they would do. And then lastly, again, close by assuming that they're buying it. So the last thing you're removing, well, how do I make this thing official? You're answering that for them. So ultimately at the end, here you go. All I need is this signature. Here you go. All I need is this amount of money. And when you have someone presenting it to you, it's understood, well, but of course I'll need the thing for you for this exchange, but here you go. And even the total will be, and then you start handing it to them, the reaction is to pay the person to get the thing that you're handing out to them. So it's not really forcing them, it's guiding them along the process. Now with that being said, they may say no. And if they say no, even after you find out what their motivation was and they still weren't interested, you let them know because they're not worth your time. Being a good salesman and or recruiter is about being very, very good about time management and knowing that certain people who show up, there's no way you can get them to buy the service or product. And it's about figuring that out and reading them, as they say, read the room. Once you figure that out, then you'll be that much more successful at knowing who to actually spend your time on. I refuse to waste my time on someone I already know is not that interested in the thing. If I see someone over there who looks more interested, then I'm going to go to that person. So there you go. I was never formally trained on being a salesman or a recruiter, but I'm really good at it. It's how I make a living. I make a great living for myself and for my family. And I'm consistently above average on my numbers. And I work for a Fortune 500 company, so I got a good life, you know. But ultimately, I'm just a guy with an English major because I was so bad at math and science that I just kind of landed in this. And turns out, basically because I'm an actor, fake it till you make it, I learned how to do this. But it was after 13 years though, it wasn't until just now that I really wrote it down and figured out what are the top 5 things I do that could help other people. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you to find more success, and maybe, just maybe, you'll end up in a career like me where you're really happy with what you do because ultimately you know the basics of it that help you to be very good at it without having to seem like some kind of annoying car salesman. Have any comments? They belong right here.